Okay, so I apologize. I look like a crazy lady right now, but I started to write out the review for the junior state law test, and I'm thinking that it's just going to be easier if I talk about it. So the first thing that you guys will need to know is the required equipment for opening a salon. So these are the things that every salon must have in order for state law to approve them of being opened. If you'd like to read where that's at, it's in the regulations packet. So that's going to be the packet that's tinier writing. And it's going to be section 7.71. So the next question they talk about, a license is considered lapsed if it's not been renewed for how many days. Basically what that means is the renewal for a cosmetology license, any cosmetology type license, I should say, is always January 31st every 2 years, depending on what year you activated, I guess. So it's considered lapsed, which really that just means it's expired, but it's not like completely expired, if that makes sense. So that it's 90 days is when it's lapsed. You guys will also need to know the difference between license renewal and reactivation. So renewal is going to be before it's expired. So renewal is that fee that you're going to pay every 2 years to keep your license activated. And then license reactivation could be from a number of reasons why your license isn't active. For example, if it's an escrow, if you just didn't pay your renewal fee, then it's going to be expired, things like that. So that would be the difference between those two. As far as fees for taking the licensing exam, registration, any fines or penalties that you're going to have to pay is going to go to the professional licensure augmentation account. And you've probably heard Miss Trudy or I say the PLAA. That's what that stands for. Student attendance. So when the school submits your guys' hours, we do it quarterly, so every 3 months. And the expiration date for registered license is going to be January 31st, regardless of what type. Yeah, January 31st, regardless of what type of license you hold. So it is set up though that every person who has just an aesthetics license, they renew their license the same 2 years every year. Same thing with instructors. Cosmetology, I believe, is the only one that can be renewed both of the 2 years. If that makes sense, you still personally do not have to renew it every year. You only have to renew it every 2 years, but there's always going to be cosmetology license renewed every year, if that makes sense. And that's always going to be January 31st. If you get unlucky like me, when I got my instructor's license over the summer, I still had to renew it this past January, even though I had only had it for 5 months. But that's just, it's because my license fell on the year that the renewal was up. So anybody who's associated with a school, for example, if there's a board meeting, a board member group or something, any staff members, anybody who puts any money into it, things like that, that is going to be considered an affiliation. Some of these are kind of the answer is in the question, if that makes sense. So just keep in mind that cosmetology, the State Board of Cosmetology, is its own separate department, because there is state board for all types of careers, but the one that we deal with specifically is State Board of Cosmetology. You guys will need to know what's considered cosmetology. So if you go to that front page of the regulations, there's going to be a whole big long paragraph about what's considered cosmetology. So you'll just need to know that. You'll need to know what natural hair braiding is, what it includes and what it does not include. So anywhere where one cosmetologist works, whether it's yourself, whatever, that's going to be considered a booth space. Now, if you work in Pennsylvania, booth space rental is illegal, but when you're in the salon, say you have your own chair, that's your booth space, right? And if you're an esthetician, say you have like a back spa room, that's your booth space. Does that make sense? Not necessarily booth space rental. It's where you specifically, the licensed cosmetologists, are working, right? You'll need to know what estheticians are allowed to practice. So that's going to, again, be like in the front section. So there's cosmetology, aesthetics, and all the different limited licenses. You'll need to know what braiding, that term means. You need to know what nail technicians are and allowed to do. You'll need to know what a limited license is. So basically, cosmetology, if you think of cosmetology like an umbrella, right? Let me draw this out. Your umbrella term, cosmetology. Oh, it's going to be backwards for you guys, right? But anyway, it's broken up. So then you can have, you can either do aesthetics, nail technology, or natural hair braiding. Okay, so that's like, they're still considered, those 3 limited licenses are still considered part of the cosmetology industry, but they're just more specific. And then of course, so that means, for example, I know you guys won't be able to see this, but if you're a licensed cosmetologist, you can do just aesthetics, you can do just nail technology, or you can just do natural hair braiding. But if you're a licensed esthetician, you cannot practice cosmetology. You cannot practice nail technology unless you have that license. Does that make sense? And then, if you're a cosmetology teacher, you can do pretty much whatever you want. So cosmetology teacher's way up here, so I can practice just cosmetology if I wanted to. I could practice aesthetics, I could practice nail technology, blah, blah, blah. But somebody who's licensed in cosmetology cannot practice teaching, if that makes sense. Just kind of wanted to explain that for you. The limited license are aesthetics, nail technology, and natural hair braiding. You guys will need to know what a tanning unit is. And just so you guys know, tanning units, because they're not technically like in our realm, right? So we don't have any regulations on them, which also means that we aren't not allowed to have them. So it's one of those things. Tanning beds are, I believe, either the FDA or OSHA, one of those 2 guys deals with the tanning beds. And there's nowhere it says you can or can't have a tanning unit. And you'll need to know how many board members there are and how many of those board members are actual like industry professionals. And I believe that they talk about that in the beginning of the cosmetology law. So that's going to be this packet, is where they get into the different members of the board and how many there are of each. Then so going along with the board members, there's 3 board members that get elected, and you'll need to know which 3 positions that is. So just like with like the presidents and stuff, board members cannot serve more than 2 consecutive terms. The next couple questions just kind of talk about what happens like with the board. So just be familiar with the state board members. Just know that new members are appointed when other ones leave. Obviously, practicing without a license is illegal, doesn't matter what. There are absolutely no exceptions for it. You'll need to know what the powers and the duty of the board is. So licenses that have been revoked can be reinstated. What that person would have to do, if for whatever reason they got it taken away, that person has to wait 5 years and then they have to retake the licensing exam in order to get their license back. If your license gets suspended, they will let you have it back if whatever was causing that suspension is over with. So say, for example, I don't even know an example when they would do that, but say you did something and you got it suspended, right? And then you fix whatever that problem was, then they will give you your license back. You need to know how many hours you need to get your esthetician license. How many hours of being in school do you need to be a natural hair braider? You'll need to know what the qualifications are to get a limited license. So, for example, for all of the cosmetology licenses, except for cosmetology instructor, you must be 16 years of age. You must have completed 10th grade or equivalent. And there's a whole bunch of other other things in case those aren't applicable or whatever. Cosmetology instructor is the only license that you have to be 18 years of age and you must have completed 12th grade for. If you choose to have an apprentice in your future salon someday, there's an application that must be filed, and then they will issue an apprentice permit. That's honestly something that's very rare. Very rare do they do that anymore. I've never met anybody who's gotten their license through an apprenticeship. It's just a lot of work, and it's 2,000 hours, whereas going to cosmetology school is 1,200. So 1,250. So that's why people don't really do it. You'll need to know who is qualified to teach an apprentice in a salon. So same thing, anytime that you're teaching and giving somebody hours, you must be a licensed cosmetology instructor. They're saying that if there's an apprentice who has not completed the 10th grade, they can qualify for other requirements through the Bureau of Rehabilitation in Department of Labor. Remember that. The max number of apprentices that a salon can have at any time if they choose to have them. They can only have 2 at a time. So say I wanted to do that in my salon, I could only have 2 for myself. And then for each apprentice, there needs to be 2 other licensed hairstylists. So say I'm the apprentice teacher and I'm working in the salon and I have 2 apprentices. There needs to be 2 licensed stylists besides myself for each of the 2 apprentices. So there's going to be 4 stylists total, plus myself and the 2 apprentices. Does that make sense? Same thing for apprentices to get their license as cosmetology students. They still have to take the licensing exam, pay the fees. They still have to submit all the same stuff that you guys do. So under no circumstances can a salon be used for any other purpose than cosmetology. So you can't have you can't turn your salon into a nightclub after hours. The rules prescribed by EPA registered rules, that's where State Board of Cosmetology gets their sanitation and disinfection rules. Health and safety rules that they prescribe for cosmetology, that's going to be practiced by all salons, schools, doesn't matter if it's a limited license salon, you still have to follow all the same regulations. So anytime we use a tool on one client, it needs to be sanitized, discarded if it's a single-use implement, immediately after each client. So for example, like the nail file, for example, that is either, depending on what type of nail file it is, if it's like the not cardboard ones, but you know what I mean, like the ones that you can break in half, then it needs to be discarded. It cannot be used on another client, or if it's one of the metal ones, it needs to be sanitized before you use it on the next person. There are a couple trick questions in here, so just keep in mind that in the salon, sanitation and regulation rules must be followed all the time. So say you're in the back room and you drop a comb. Just because you're in the back room and nobody sees you doesn't mean like the rules don't apply. So you always need to be making sure you're following sanitation procedures. Unused cloth or paper towels, so clean paper towels and cloths, need to be kept in a closed cabinet or towel dispenser. We at my salon have like a little cabinet and it has a glass window and you just open it up and you take your fresh towel out. That's pretty common, I would say, in most salons. If they're used, they need to be placed in a closed soiled linen container. So just think about how at the school right next to the washing machine, we have the salon dirty bin. That lid always stays closed, and that's where those dirty towels are going. When you're doing facials, you must always lay a clean cloth down on the facial chair headrest. Also, too, you guys need to know what items are not allowed in the salon. So powder puffs and styptic pencils. Powder puffs are for makeup. We can't clean them that easily. And styptic pencils, they are allowed to use in barbershops, but they're not sanitary because they're a pencil. And I don't know if any of you guys watched my makeup theory the other day for chapter 24, but we did kind of talk about how it's very hard to sanitize pencils because that is something that touches the client's skin directly. And all a styptic pencil is, it's for somebody, say like you were giving them a haircut and you nicked them or something. The styptic pencil is kind of supposed to go in there and check the blood, like check the cut. So it's just not legal, and it should not be legal for barbers either, but they have their own set of laws that we can't do anything about. Anytime you remove a product from a container or a jar, you must scoop it up with a spatula. Some of these you guys definitely know, like sanitation wise, like if you ever drop something, right, you know that you need to clean it immediately. Obviously, anytime you use the bathroom, things like that, you need to make sure that you're cleaning, like washing your hands and stuff. And I hope you all learned after this whole coronavirus crap how extremely important it is to be sanitary and clean. If you happen to run into a blood exposure incident, you are supposed to use a liquid or powdered astringent to check the bleeding. And checking the bleeding, all that means is to make it stop. As far as draping the client, we need to make sure we're always putting a neck strip under the cape. And if you're ever in a pinch, you can use a paper towel. So obviously, if you did not renew your license, the biennial renewal time, then your license is considered deactivated. And you'll need to just be familiar with Section 4 of the Clean Indoor Air Act. That is like the act that says you may not smoke inside. So state law, there is 53 questions. If you guys have any questions for me or you need more clarification on something, just let me know. I don't mind if you guys reach out. Good luck. I hope you guys don't sweat it too much, all right? And then I will be doing a review for the state law as well. Okay?